2024 has proven to be a different kind of year for Star Citizen. A multitude of improvements introduced last year are in the game. Server meshing has proven a functional system, the studios in general seem more in step with each other, though still have some issues. Squadron 42 is a tangible possibility, and the player-facing side of the game, the part we actually play and care about, seems to have been getting some much-needed direction compared to before. From major shifts at the top of the company to the very pillars of Star Citizen finally showing face, it's a big year for the game and a big proving ground. But are they sticking to their beginning of the year promises? And even if the year is different, does that mean that Star Citizen is going in the direction players want? First today, we'll look at why Star Citizen is different in 2024, then we'll check out how it's actually playing different as of June. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. One thing that has become clear to many following Star Citizen is that they are pushing for faster progress. This is made most apparent by Richard Tyrer, essentially second in command of Star Citizen, when earlier this year he emphasized a push to get more of what they've been talking about actually into players' hands.
Absolutely. I mean, when I look at Star Citizen itself, I want it to be a cohesive experience that is all tied together. And I want to get there as soon as possible. I want somebody to be able to play the game and understand all the things that they have available to them. Now, don't get me wrong, we have a lot of gameplay already in the game, but it's in isolated pockets. It's like if you want to just be a miner, great, you can go and do mining, you can do that loop. But I want the connections. I want the interwebbing. That's the difference between features and content and a game. And I want to push towards that as quickly as possible.
This generally sounds like marketing speak, but this has proven fairly true this year. A multitude of changes were introduced at last year's annual convention, and more than 24 of them have been added to the game since, with one of the biggest, freight elevators, persistent hangars, and cargo hauling improvements coming within weeks at the time of writing. I went over this in my stream this past week, and if you want to get into the weeds about this stuff, we have these deep dive sessions every week, or you can watch the summaries over on my second channel, Space Tomato 2. In this episode, we went over everything that was posited as coming this year back in December, as well as everything discussed on stage at CitizenCon last year. It should be up on the second channel by now. We determined that, unlike previous years, they are actually delivering on the things they're talking about. Now, the reason for this is a few different things that may or may not bore you to certain extents, but also explain a bit of the long development cycle. When this whole project started, the company was very small, a true upstart vibe compared to what we see now. The game engine they wanted to be used, CryEngine, was a very single-player, small-scale toolset that would need an absolute gargantuan effort to make viable to build a space sim. Again, very limited compared to what we see now. And to be honest, back then when it all started, the idea of the game was a lot different. Even the CEO, Chris Roberts, admits this.
It's a bit of a Pandora's box that got opened when we realized we had the level of support to really go all the way, because it's a completely different scope of game now than 10 years ago when I got on stage and I was pitching a much more limited, sort of privateer, freelancer online, and a next generation wing commander. What we're building now is a completely different experience in terms of a lot more fidelity and scope and possibility in the idea that you can do and be anything.
You've certainly heard about feature creep when it comes to Star Citizen, and it was a reality for several years there. I would say that aspect of the development mainly died down towards 2018 when 3.0 came out and the persistent universe we play today really started to see better development. But in those early years, there was just so much. The money only continued to pour in as many people wanted to experience the same magic of space games that the 90s brought us. Well, the us that weren't toddlers like myself. In these early stages, like many Kickstarters, pledge goals were made. Q&As about possible ideas were made completely public, theory crafting happened right on camera, and the community got to make the call to expand the game with no end in sight. Obviously, that wasn't possible, and CIG did start to rein things in at some point, but by then, there was a lot to live up to, and it was going to be really difficult to fund all of that development. So of course, as is still true today, the ship sales existed back then, proving a very successful means of funding the game. Without a publisher or previous products to use to fund development, the crowdfunding model stuck, and players could and still can buy ships with real money to help pay for development. I advise anybody who is new to the game to pay the minimum $45 in or $60 if you're feeling extra spicy, and experience everything the game has to offer before making a decision as to what you want to pursue and buying a ship with real money. But back to ye olden days. Tons of promised features, a pickup of a ton of the original engineers that worked on CryEngine at Crytek, ridiculous hype from the community, and the newly solidified ability to create entire explorable worlds made things rough. Management, in my opinion, did not do a good job of prioritizing and triaging the right things for the game to progress, leading to a ton of communication, but not much progress, and what felt like a whole bunch of treading water for quite some time, until it felt like the teams really started to effectively work together better, only really in the last few years. Nobody was really certain where things were headed, just that the game was being worked on. Now don't get me wrong, at this point people were playing a version of the game. The game engine was seeing pretty clear major changes already and things were moving along. Features were coming out, ships were releasing, and people were enjoying missions and features. But look at what we have now. Communication has been dialed in multitudes, expectations are set much more carefully, and things are only really talked about if the company is pretty confident we'll see them in the next year or two. Updates are releasing with much more usable features that actually make a difference to the game. The necessary features needed are more clearly laid out. The game engine is seeing its first 1.0 version release. The company is now large enough to properly tackle major tasks and initiatives, and the teams have been built out enough to work in tandem to deliver an actual game. Kinda. There's also the fact that Squadron 42, the separate narrative single-player game on a completely different dev branch, has reached what they are calling a feature-complete state, meaning many of the development efforts dedicated to that game over the last several years can be brought back over to Star Citizen to focus more on the MMO. So they say. There are still plenty of problems with the development, but from the positions being filled higher in the company and the things those positions are saying, the maturing of the game's engine and back-end tech like server meshing, the focus on tightening up gameplay and actually making the new player experience not a disaster, there's a lot more to this game now than any year prior. But with all that being said, what is it actually like to play the game? Something else you may have heard about Star Citizen is its stability. It's bad, awful, and frustrating at times. Currently, every instance is running on one server, and with a game that tries to persist everything that happens from weapons dropped to ships destroyed to cargo scattered in space, this causes problems over time. If you want to learn more about the solution of this problem, server meshing, I'll leave the video linked down below. For now, the game is still going to be a pain to play at times, no matter your PC. And this isn't just due to the servers, the optimizations of the game have barely started. Yes, DLSS and FSR were just added to the game, but with the game engine only just reaching 1.0 and the game still not being feature complete, the balance of stability and feature growth are a bit at odds. This can be very anger-inducing for some. If that's you, I highly advise you stay away from this game for now. It's fun, but it's not a stable game, and you'll run into bugs, problems, and game design decisions that don't make sense in a vacuum. Gameplay-wise, 2024 is the best year this game has ever seen. Mining has its problems, of course, but you've got ground, vehicle, and ship-based mining available to you right now, and you can bring along friends for multi-crew or even multi-ship experiences. While there aren't hand-holding missions or tutorials for this just yet, you can just fly out into space and find things to mine whenever you want. Salvage is even more approachable. With less danger involved and plenty of legal and illegal missions to take, you can get dozens of hours of relaxing hull scraping, ship disintegrating, and cargo acquisition across various wrecks and derelict ships in different places. Combat is all the rage. While ship-based bounty hunting gives you easy, quick money and a fairly exciting space combat experience, it's really the reputation progression that makes it work well. Reputation with companies and government entities is one of the main forms of progression in this game, and as you move your way up, you'll receive harder bounties in different scenarios for more pay. The variety is still low, but we've seen master modes, better turret gameplay, new targeting and weapon balances, better ship AI, VFX, and general experience when it comes to ship combat, making this much more fun for players that are looking for a general space combat experience. On the FPS combat side, an experience that I've universally hated for this whole project is now probably my favorite thing to do. This gameplay is also tied to reputation and feels a bit more progressive to me, moving you from small bunkers to large multi-structured facilities. FPS AI has seen improvements, the entire HUD looks different, features like backpack reloading and magazine packing make the experience feel a bit more deep and rewarding. Guns have seen updates across the board, and the new environments are much more interesting to fight in. As long as your server is running fairly well, FPS combat in the game is a lot more fun than it used to be. That being said, you aren't going to find a COD or Tarkov level experience here yet, but it's headed in a good direction and continuing to become more approachable. There are other mission-assisted options in the game too. Maintenance missions have you disposing of waste, research missions could have you deploying a probe, and investigations can be a simple find the lost body in a deep cave or a narrated space station disaster mystery.
Hey Darnell, it's Racine over at Corporate Ops. Give me a shout back when you clock in.
They are scattered and there's not much rhyme or reason to the way that they occur, but you'll find plenty of entertainment on offer here. There are even entire racing leagues where you can top the public leaderboards. Cargo hauling is an option through smaller courier missions or free trade on the market where you just buy and haul, but we'll be seeing a big update to that gameplay overall in the next few weeks. Game types like true exploration, farming, base building, crafting, passenger transport, refueling, refining, and engineering are all still in the works, but you can keep up with their development here on the channel. Besides game loops, the general quality of the game has improved recently. New rendering options allow players to more finely tune graphics settings. Cargo physicalization means you can steal, transport, and trade cargo with other people and ships. You can also use these boxes to carry your goods around with you if the backpack is too small and you want to be a mule. The Arena Commander game type allows for offline custom closed servers where you can dogfight, FPS battle, play Star Citizen's own version of gun game, and eventually PvE horde mode, race, or just free flight and practice controlling ships in atmosphere and in space. The replication layer, a new piece of backend tech, has now been added to make players much less likely to experience a full crash out of the game, but rather just continue their progression on a different server when their server does crash. The single-player game, Squadron 42, is approaching content complete, and many of the features and development efforts of that game are beginning to show up in Star Citizen, providing a more polished experience. Points of interest are thriving through caves, derelict ships, outposts, small settlements, and the new distribution centers. And above all, the community has exploded. More players have joined the game after 2020 than before, and you'll have no problem finding friends, guides, and groups to join and play with. The official public forums, Reddit, and Discord are all great places to discuss and learn, and my own org does offer a pretty cool group of people to come and play with. We're always looking for new members to get started in the verse, so I'll leave our Discord server linked down below and the link to apply. And as I covered in one of my recent supporter exclusive videos, which we'll release publicly a few months from now, the game just keeps growing. Yes, the features might not be what we want. The development doesn't always seem to focus on making the best experience for players right now, and oftentimes it feels like it can take a long time to do things that you just wouldn't expect to. But without fail, every 3 to 4 months, the game sees some kind of an update. We see new features develop, we see things improve, bugs be fixed, and the general design take a step forward. There are slow years and there are fast years. 2024 is definitely a faster year. But overall, players continue to jump in because things continue to move towards a goal. And I think out of every year we've experienced, 2024 feels like one of the biggest signs of that. So if you're looking for a good time to jump into Star Citizen and you're okay with the instability, delayed features, and possibility of the game not heading in the direction you like, this is a pretty good year to jump back in and try. And there are plenty of free fly events throughout the year where you can jump in without spending any money. You can also keep up with development through weekly sit-down interviews, weekly news and development updates, monthly development reports, and regular communications with devs across the different services like Twitter, Discord, and Reddit. There's a lot to know about what's going on with Star Citizen right now in 2024, and there's going to be even more to know about what's coming up next. Because I didn't talk about most of the features in development for the rest of this year and early next year that we already know about. If you'd like to know more about that stuff, I just recently released a video detailing the next major update scheduled for the second half of this year. After that, with things like base building, crafting, capital ships, and new star systems on the horizon, there's going to be a lot to discuss. If you want to keep up with it, I publish weekly looks into the development here, as well as more casual updates on features and news from the last week in my feature watches. Whatever you decide, thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something new, and I'll catch you in the next.